This happened during the beginning of April a few decades ago. Supposedly it was April Fool's Day, but I never cared for that holiday, if it can even be called a holiday. I've always hated pranks and practical jokes, and never understood why April Fools was even a thing. Nonetheless, I had a husband whom I recently got married with, just shy of a few months. We eventually moved into our first house together, around a rural part of town. The area had a few houses, but was separated by a few acres of land, so it was almost as if we didn't see much of our neighbors, or anyone for that matter. One night, on a Saturday, my husband went out to get some groceries last minute. He left me alone in the house to start making dinner with what we had. I remember chopping vegetables and then hearing a loud knock at the front door. It was weird for that time of night, but I had no idea it was the start of the most terrifying experience of my life. I walked over and looked through the peephole, but nobody was there. I made sure the door was locked and went back to the kitchen to forget about it. Not even a minute later, I heard the same knocking again. This time I raced over to the door and looked outside, hoping to catch the culprit, but there was still nobody there. I was partly annoyed and partly freaked out, but I knew the most reasonable explanation was that some kids were playing ding-dong ditch around the block. I did my best to ignore it and finish chopping up the vegetables. At that point, there wasn't much left for me to do to get dinner going until my husband got back with the meat, so I took a break and headed to the bathroom. Right as I was walking past the door, it happened again. Someone started knocking on the door, but this time they didn't stop. Whoever was there wasn't running off. I started to panic in that moment, knowing I had to see who it was. As I crept up to the door, the knocking turned into banging on the door. Despite the terror, I found the courage to look through the peephole, and that's when I saw the most horrifying looking man on the other side, trying to break down my door.
Knock, knock! You're supposed to say who's there!
His clothes were filthy and torn to shreds, and he was wearing a scary-ass looking mask over his face. It was like he knew I'd just seen him, because that's when he started making demands.
Open up! You gotta let me in! I'm homeless! Help me out! Don't you have a heart?
Go away! Pick a different house!
You piece of garbage! You're not gonna feed a starving man!
Please leave! I'm calling the cops!
No, you're not! You're gonna open this door and give me some food, or else I'll eat something else of yours!
I stepped back from the door, fear coursing through my veins. My thoughts started racing to everything that the man might do to me if he got inside. I didn't know when my husband would be home, so I ran to the kitchen to grab the phone and dial 911. While I was talking to the operator, the man outside started slamming against the door with his whole body. I had just enough time to grab a knife, but before I knew it, he broke through. I started to freeze up. I knew I was too afraid to use the knife against him, even though he was walking towards me like a psycho who might do anything. And yet, he wasn't even able to get to me before my vision started to fade and get blurry. My legs felt weak, and it was like my chest was suddenly collapsing. The last thing I remember was crashing to the ground and hitting my head against the counter.
No, wake up! Please, I'm sorry! No! What have I done? What have I done? It was just an April Fool's prank! No! And that was the last time I ever saw my wife alive. I have nobody to blame but myself. I killed my wife over a stupid April Fool's prank. I can still remember the moment I knew she was gone. Cops were already on their way and I didn't know what else to do. So I just held on to her and sobbed until they came into the house and took her away from me. At first, I thought it was the way she fell and hit her head that was the cause of death, but it was later ruled that she had a heart attack from the sheer amount of fright she was experiencing. I confessed to everything and got put in prison for a few years for manslaughter, but that wasn't nearly enough punishment for what I did. Even after all these years, all the hours spent in therapy and talks I've had with her family, I still haven't forgiven myself. I don't think I ever will. I've come to terms with the fact that having to live with myself, with all the guilt and the shame and regret, that's the punishment I deserve.
This story was inspired by a disturbing April Fool's incident that allegedly happened decades ago involving a Tennessee farmer named John Aarons, who was looking for a harmless laugh at the expense of his new wife, would go on to accidentally kill her just a month into their relationship. Getting kitted up in some tatty clothes and a white mask, Aaron knocked on the door of his own home and asked his wife for a meal, quote unquote shouting, "I'm homeless, let me come in, cook me a meal." The woman promptly fainted and was later taken to the hospital, where she later died. The doctors put her cause of death down to fright.
I lived with my dad when I was a teenager, and on St. Patrick's Day one year, he left me alone in the house to go drinking all night. I was pretty used to being home alone when he was at work or partying, so I didn't think anything of it. If I made any plans for the holiday, I would have easily snuck out of the house, but nothing was really going on for me that year, so I stayed in and tried to relax. While I was brushing my teeth, I heard someone knocking on the front door. I walked downstairs with my toothbrush still in my mouth and checked it out, but nobody was there. I opened the door, and nobody was there. I figured it was just some ding-dong ditchers. A few minutes later, a storm came through and started raining on the neighborhood pretty heavily, so I was happy to assume that there were no more kids running around and ringing people's doorbells for kicks. I decided to watch a movie in the dark, so I sat down on the couch next to the window. After about an hour, I heard the same knocking sound come from the front door again. This time, I grabbed my dad's flashlight and shined it out into the rain to look for the culprit. However, I still didn't see anyone. I started to get paranoid, so I went around the house making sure all the windows and doors were locked. Once I was sure the house was secure, I finished the movie I was watching, then scrolled on my phone for a few hours until I eventually passed out. What the hell was that?
Open up! I want your gold! No way! Get out of here! I'm not letting you in my house! I said let me in, damn it! I'm getting in there no matter what you do, you bitch! Open the door and relinquish your gold! Now! Leave me alone or I'm calling the cops! Where's your gold, huh? Where are you hiding it? I don't have any gold! My dad just uses his credit card! Well then, where's he? Please, you have to believe me. I don't have any gold. Only thing gold is my Honey Nut Cheerios, and I ain't talking cereal. Just let me go, you little insect! Don't lie to a leprechaun! Please don't hurt me! Well, I wouldn't have to now, would I? If you were wearing any green! I'm not going out like this! I ain't dying to a man with short man syndrome! I'll rip your head off for saying that! Somebody help me! Oh! You're lucky ripping your head off your shoulders wouldn't be as satisfying as a fresh pot of gold! Where is it? Where's the gold? A house like this can't be cheap! I know you're rich, so where's your stash?
You've reached 911. Please describe the nature of your emergency.
There's a little person in my house. A leprechaun.
A leprechaun. Are you serious?
Yes! You got to be kidding me! There's not a single flake! I didn't realize I was breaking into a broke person's house!
Is that his voice I'm hearing?
Yes! Who in the hell are you talking to? The police! I hope you know they're on their way!
Sir, please don't antagonize the intruder.
Give me that! Hello? Who's this? Ooh, a lady! Hey, you wanna ride on my rainbow till you get my pot of gold? Freaking slut hung up on me! Please, just get out of my house! Fine, but I'm taking this! It would be a waste of time if I left empty-handed! Happy St. Patrick's Day, loser! Why? What's this? Nobody's gonna believe me. A freaking leprechaun?
This story was inspired by an incident that happened in 2018. It was alleged the man dressed as a leprechaun would go around taunting his neighbors in a bizarre outburst during St. Patrick's Day. A 61-year-old man named Christopher Blackshaw would go around staring through the windows of multiple homes around the neighborhood and would repeatedly make V signs at them. Blackshaw would eventually get caught and plead guilty to behaving in a threatening or abusive manner, likely to cause a reasonable person fear or alarm. He admitted to staring at the multiple occupants and making offensive gestures at them, all while dressed in the distinctive green outfit. Blackshaw claimed in his defense that he committed the offenses because his neighbors had been deliberately pointing a strong flashlight at him, trying to induce an epileptic fit. He told Livingston J.P. Court in a letter that his neighbors were aware that he suffered from the common neurological condition, which can spark repeated seizures. The man was then fined by the court since. Jeez, these things are going to disintegrate by the time I get there. Hey Mike, what's up?
Hi, Mark. Are you on your way yet? Fred and I are waiting on you.
Yeah, I'm just around the corner. I'll be there in a few seconds. You got plenty of beer, right?
Yeah, Fred's about to grab some. Just hurry up, will ya?
Perfect. I'll see you soon.
Alright, see you soon, Mark.
So this is what Easter's all about, huh? I'm definitely gonna need me some double-D'd Easter eggs to hatch later. Whoa, dude, that was quick. What can I say? I'm dying to have you over. Come on in. Thanks. So, where is everyone? Fred's getting the beers. Everyone else is running a bit late. I guess they're gonna be late to the big game, huh? Dude, if you're fiending for some booze, then I suggest you check my basement. I may have an extra case of beer stashed somewhere down there. You may also find some trees that I intend to burn later, so don't go stealing any, alright? Oh, yeah? Say no more. You said it's downstairs, right? It's in my cooler in the basement. I told you it would be ice cold, didn't I? Yeah, sure, dude. Alright, come here. The basement is down past this door over here, but there's just one thing. The lights don't work down there, so you'll need this. What do you mean the lights don't work? Couldn't you just replace a light bulb? There's an issue with the circuits. I have an electrician coming next week, but for now, this is what we're working with. Does that suit you, Miss Princess? Yeah, that's fine. Good. Don't mind the mess. You shouldn't have trouble finding it. I hope not. Whoa. I told you it was dark down there, didn't I? Yeah, whatever. I'll see you in a minute, okay? Hey! What the hell, dude? Stupid freaking weirdo. Just go down to the basement, Mark. It's not creepy as hell down there at all. Just grab the beer that was supposed to be on the table in the first place. Come back up. No big deal. Not like Mr. Mike could grab it himself. No, not at all. That's not the job of a host. No. My God, this is creepy as hell. Don't worry about the mess, Mark. Just get the freaking beer and get the hell out of here. Where's the cooler? Cooler. Come on, Mike. What do you mean? I shouldn't have trouble finding it? You've got a whole junkyard down here. You're a great help, Mike. What the? Are you kidding me? That's your cooler? What kind of animal are you? Now, let's see if there's really any beer in here after all. Ah! Jesus Christ! Fred, what the hell? What's happening? Mike, why are you in a bunny costume? And why are you holding a machete? That's you, right? I couldn't find the cooler or the beer. Could you, point out where I'm supposed to look? I'm not trying to intrude or look through anything you don't want me to, you know? That's a great costume you've got there. Hey, slow down. I'm just saying it's very topical, timely, you know? 'Cause it's Easter. I like what you're doing, really. Mike, stop, please. Come on, don't do anything crazy. I'm your friend. I won't tell anyone about this, Mike. Mike, you're not gonna hurt me, right? This story was a dramatized version of a fan-submitted story that allegedly happened in the Easter of 2015. The way the original story was presented was the individual being horrifically tormented by his roommate as a sadistic Easter Sunday prank. The individual lived in a shared student house where he would find himself locked in the basement after getting lured by his roommate on Easter night. After a period of time, the roommate would dress up as an evil Easter bunny and holding a large knife as a prank. The victim has disclosed that he had taken a photograph of the ordeal as evidence. Here's an image of it. The victim claims that he decided not to file any charges toward the roommate out of spite that things would get more awkward in the household. The victim has mentioned that he has since broken off any contact with that particular roommate despite making amends.
I had been living in university housing for a full year before it all went down. Everything was totally fine at first. I liked all of my roommates, and I was doing well in all of my classes. Then, at the start of my second year, a new guy moved into the dorm. His name was Stuart, and that's when my life became hell. It wasn't like Stuart was a bad roommate or anything. He was usually pretty quiet, and he cleaned up after himself. The problem was that I just hated him as a person. He was just incredibly pretentious and thought he was better than everyone else. A real goody two-shoes. It made being around him almost unbearable. And of course, our dorm wasn't that big, so it's not like I could avoid him very easily. I was forced to see him every day. He wasn't the kind of guy that you could ignore either. He would always have something to talk to me about, and it usually involved him bragging about himself in some way. I tried to tolerate him as much as I could, but he made it very difficult. Then, one day, I came home to catch him talking crap about me behind my back. He made some lame attempt to cover it up, but it was obvious that he had been talking about me. I really started to hate him after that. I started to think of ways that I could get even with him. First, I thought that I could get him kicked out of the dorm, but that seemed like it could backfire too easily. Then I had the most perfect idea. April Fool's was coming up soon, and I was going to play a prank on him. So on March 31st, I waited in my room until it was very late at night. Around 2 a.m., it was officially April Fool's Day, and now I could begin to implement my plan. I slowly and quietly left my room and crept behind a wall where I would have a good view of Stuart's door. I needed to get into his room without him seeing me, and he would usually go to the washroom at some point during the night, so I stood there and waited for the moment to come. It took a little while, but eventually, I watched as Stuart's door open. He sleepily walked into the washroom and shut the door behind him. I knew that I only had a few minutes at that point, so I didn't waste any time sneaking into his room. Once I was inside, I frantically searched his room until I found his water dispenser. After I found it, There was only one thing left to do. I had come up with the ultimate prank. So I took out a chemical that I had stolen from class and began contaminating his water dispenser as my April Fool's prank. I had to move swiftly before Stuart came back. Adrenaline was coursing through me. I finished it just in time. I had barely gotten out of his room and snuck into mine before Stuart came out of the washroom. One more second and he would have caught me, but I didn't. I quietly crawled back into bed. Now all I had to do was wait. About 5 to 10 minutes and I heard nothing. I assumed he went back to bed and didn't drink from the dispenser, so I decided to go to sleep. That is, until I started hearing Stuart coughing. It was light at first, but then it became crazy. I walked out of my room and stood in the hallway in the dark. I wanted to be able to hear it better and make sure it was actually him and not just my head playing tricks on me. Stuart ended up staying home the next day. He was apparently too sick to attend class. Instead, he spent the whole day in his room coughing. I wanted to enjoy every minute of his misery, so I skipped class that day as well. It was just too satisfying to know that my prank had turned out so perfectly. This went on for several days. All throughout, Stuart continued to miss class, and I continued to do the same. I had told my professors that I was staying home to nurse Stuart back to health, but I really just wanted to listen. It was a beautiful sound. I stood in that hallway day and night listening to Stuart, of course, was unaware of this. He had bigger things to worry about. As I listened to him, he started to sound like he was getting worse, a lot worse. I eventually took Stuart to the hospital. He died a few days after that. The doctor said that if he had been brought in sooner, they probably could have saved him. A toxicology report revealed that there had been chemicals in Stuart's system that had led to his demise. His death was labeled a murder. The cops arrested me under suspicion as I had been the one to bring Stuart in. After they questioned me, I eventually admitted to tampering with Stuart's water dispenser, and I was charged. At my trial, I tried to use the fact that it was an April Fool's prank as my defense, but the judge denied it. I was sentenced to life in prison. As I stand here in prison, I can't help but be happy about one thing. At least I don't have Stuart as a roommate anymore. This story was inspired by a horrific April Fool's incident that happened in 2013. A Chinese university student named Lin Senhao was condemned to death after he was found guilty of fatally poisoning his roommate Huang Yang's drinking water. Lin claimed that the death was an accident after an innocent April Fool's Day prank which had ended in tragedy. However, a judge ruled that the act was malicious and Lin had intentionally murdered his roommate out of spite. Huang drank water from a spiked dispenser at a Shanghai university on April 1st, but did not pass away until a couple months later. A post-mortem revealed that he had been poisoned with a toxin Lin had taken from a laboratory where he was an intern. It was also reported that the victim often described Lin as stingy, and once criticized their other roommate's bad behavior to Lin's, which most likely triggered Lin's April Fool's actions. My friends and I never missed a St. Paddy's Day. It was always one of our favorite days of the year. We'd spent the whole night out at bars, drinking and partying until we were completely wasted. It had been a tradition since we were all in college together. Then, one year, that all changed. When St. Paddy's Day arrived, Jess, Riley, and I met up early on in the night and headed over to a bar. In the past, we had gone to some crazy spots around town where people went pretty wild. But now that we were all in our 30s, we preferred to go to this one lounge bar that we liked. It tended to have a more mature crowd than other places, which meant that we didn't have to feel like we were surrounded by teenagers the entire night. Of course, just because we wanted a more mature crowd didn't mean we weren't ready to party. As soon as we got there, the three of us started going at it hard. Most of the time, we all had to be responsible enough to make sure that we didn't go too far. But on St. Paddy's Day, we threw all of that out the window. It was the one night of the year that I often didn't remember everything that happened the next day. When we were all good and wasted, we headed out onto the dance floor. That's when we really started enjoying ourselves. It was already feeling like the perfect night. The music was great, the crowd wasn't too rowdy, and I was drunk enough that I could make a fool of myself and not care. This had been going on for a while, when I suddenly noticed Riley getting hit on across the room. The first thing I noticed was that she looked really uncomfortable. Then I saw the guy and immediately understood why. He was this creepy, slender guy, Latino, about average height, and a little older. Everything about him made him look like a douche. His face was the creepiest thing about him, though. He just kind of looked sinister. I guess Riley rejected him, though, because the next thing I knew, she was walking over to me and Jess to dance. The whole situation looked incredibly awkward, and as I looked back at the guy, he seemed upset. He was staring at Riley intensely from across the room, watching her every move. It was super creepy. The bar wasn't packed either since it was more of a lounge, so it made things even more awkward. We couldn't just disappear in the crowd and avoid the man. No matter where we sat or danced, he could always still see us. The man continued to stand at the bar area like a creep and stare at us, even after it had been over an hour since Riley had left him there. I had thought that he would have moved on to some other girl after a few minutes, but he didn't seem to be able to get over her. The guy had to be some sort of psycho to still be watching her this much later. He started to make me feel very uneasy. What made it worse was how he just stood by the bar, so every time that we went up to buy more drinks we would encounter him. There was no way around it. Jess and I tried to get Riley to stop going up there, but she wouldn't listen to us.
There's no way I'm letting that creep ruin my night.
So she continued to run into the man every time she went up to the bar. Each time that she did, he would hit on her again, no matter how many times that she said no. He just couldn't take the hint. The guy was crazy. Riley somehow didn't seem to be too bothered by it though, so I tried to put it out of my mind and enjoy the night. Then, at one point, Riley went for another drink, and all of a sudden, the man started screaming at her. I was across the room when I heard it happen, and I didn't know what to do at first. Then I saw the man grab her wrist and try to pull her toward him.
Why are you rejecting me, you stupid bitch? Women like you need to be humble!
Ah! Let me go, you psycho bastard!
I ran off the dance floor to come to Riley's aid and yelled at the man to let her go. Then, out of nowhere, the man let go of Riley's wrist and came charging at me.
Ah!
He looked like he was trying to strangle me. I kicked and punched at him repeatedly, but I was barely able to fight him off. The guy was absolutely insane. Eventually, the staff were able to grab the man and escort him out of the bar. My friends and I were shaken up, but we were glad that the man was finally gone. We tried to drink the night away and still have a great St. Paddy's Day, but it was hard to get back into it after that terrifying ordeal. After a few more hours, we left the bar and walked to our respective cars to head home. The next day, I woke up with a terrible hangover. I texted Jess and Riley to see how they were feeling. Jess answered right away, but Riley didn't respond. I got a little worried after a few hours and tried to give her a call, but she didn't answer. And actually, from that point, I never heard from her again. Later that day, I found out that Riley's body had been discovered in an alleyway. It was later revealed that the same guy from the bar had kidnapped her on her way home and executed her shortly after. Police were able to use phone data to indicate that the man had been in the same room as Riley between 2 and 3 a.m. During that time, they received a 911 call from Riley's phone, but the call was immediately disconnected. Authorities tried to return her call, but the attempts were unsuccessful. Shortly after, her phone reportedly dropped off the network. The man has been arrested since. I'll never forget that night, though, and I'll never forgive that man for taking my friend away from me. The most horrible thing is that Riley left behind 3 sons. This story was inspired by a case regarding a 34-year-old Colorado missing mom of 3 who went missing from a bar more than 4 years ago. The woman was named Rita Gutierrez Garcia, whose remains were discovered in an alley behind a bar on March 18, 2018, around 2:30 a.m. Gutierrez Garcia and her friends had been celebrating St. Patrick's Day the night leading into her early morning disappearance. Juan Figueroa Jr., 33, was identified as a possible suspect early on in the case, who pled guilty to the kidnapping and slaying of Gutierrez Garcia. According to court documents, Gutierrez Garcia and Figueroa had briefly interacted with each other at a bar shortly before she went missing. Phone tower data indicated the location of Gutierrez Garcia's phone matched the location in which Figueroa's car traveled between 2:30 a.m. and 3:10 a.m. During that time frame, Police said they received a 911 hang-up call from the victim's phone. 2 attempts to return Gutierrez Garcia's call were unsuccessful. Shortly after, her phone reportedly dropped off the network. On March 20, 2018, Figueroa fled the state of Colorado for Mexico, and then attempted to cross back into the US on March 27, 2018, but was arrested for the attempted assault of another woman. He was found guilty and is currently serving a 93 years to life sentence.
Behind me is the site of a local legend. Many residents don't believe that the Bunny Man is anything more than a myth. But tonight it seems as though it could be truer than previously thought. A young couple walking through this overpass reported to the police that they were chased by a man with a hatchet. The man was apparently unstable, and as the legend goes, he was wearing an Easter Bunny costume. Luckily, the couple was able to get away, but as we approach Easter Sunday, authorities are urging the public to avoid passing under this bridge.
What a bunch of BS. A killer Easter Bunny. Please. The news will say anything just to get some views. Ah! Oh! It's just Amanda.
Hey, Charlie.
Hey, I'm almost ready to go. I really want to come see you, but I have to make sure my parents are completely asleep first.
Yeah, about that. I think you should stay in tonight.
Why?
Listen, I'm a little worried about you walking around on your own tonight. You know, with all the rumors going around right now.
You mean the Bunny Man stuff? Come on, you can't be serious. That's all just a bunch of fear-mongering. That story's like 50 years old.
No, I'm serious. People have been going missing the last few days, and Easter is tomorrow.
I'm not scared of a guy in an Easter Bunny costume. He's probably just some weirdo getting off of work from the mall. Hey, how about this? I've got a GoPro, right? I'll strap it to my head and go by the bridge on my way and show you that it's all a bunch of stupid rumors.
Are you crazy? That's a terrible idea. I think you should stay home tonight. We'll figure something else out.
Nope, it's too late. My mind is already set on finding your Easter eggs.
Ew, gross. What does that even mean?
25%. That should be enough. I'll show those news nerds what real journalism is. There it is. That's the trail where the Bunny Man supposedly waits for its victims. Doesn't seem that scary. I can't remember which direction the tunnel is. It's supposed to go under the train tracks, so... that must be it. For anyone watching this video, the plan is to just walk under the bridge and go through without stopping. Just to prove that if you mind your business and don't stick around like a sitting duck, then no crazy bunny man is going to attack you. When you're alone and it's dark out, you've got to keep your head... Jesus, where did you come from? Yeah, I'll get out of your territory. Ah! What the hell was that about? What are you running from? It better be a freaking barrel. Okay, I admit, I kind of wish I didn't decide to do this right now, especially right before Easter, but you know what? I'm not backing down yet. It shouldn't be too much farther, just right around this corner. There, that's the bridge, the Bunny Man Bridge. Except I don't see any Easter Bunny. I guess it must all be a... Oh my god, it's him! I can't believe it! What do I do now? Really? That's just great! Screw it. None of this is real. It's all just a hoax that's got me all paranoid. And now I'm seeing things. There's definitely no way there's actually some weirdo in an Easter Bunny costume waiting for me in that tunnel with a hatchet. I'm just gonna walk through it and everything will be fine. No way! Ah! I really screwed up this time. I think I'm hiding in some hobo's bush toilet. It reeks. There's flies everywhere. Oh, God, I should have listened to her.
Please, let me go!
This story was inspired by a horrific Easter Bunny urban legend regarding the Bunny Man. The legend originated from 2 incidents in Fairfax County, Virginia in 1970, but has been spread throughout the Washington, D.C. and Maryland areas. The legend has many variations. Most involve a man wearing a rabbit costume who attacks people with an axe or hatchet. Most of the stories occur around Colchester Overpass, a southern railway overpass spanning Colchester Road near Clifton, Virginia, sometimes referred to as the Bunny Man Bridge. Variations of the legend vary in the Bunny Man's name, motives, and victims, and in some accounts, victims' remains being mutilated. Some believe that the Bunny Man's ghost is said to come out of his place of death each year on Easter or Halloween to commemorate his passing.
This happened around Easter of 2016. I was in my early teens at the time and didn't have my driver's license yet, so I was forced to walk everywhere because my parents were always working, and they didn't have time to drive me to most places. Sometimes it was a little annoying, but I didn't mind usually. Like I said before, this was around Easter time, so most parents would take their kids out to the mall. That's why I decided to walk the mall one evening alone. I didn't really have any plans for that day, and I didn't want to just sit around the house by myself, so I decided that I would hang out over there and maybe look around some stores. Maybe possibly get a photograph with the mall Easter Bunny. Well, so it just turns out that my wish would come true. As I strolled around the mall looking around a few stores, I came across a huge line leading up towards a platform where the Easter Bunny was taking photos with all of the kids. At first, I couldn't see the bunny through all of the people surrounding the place, but then I caught sight of it through the crowd. I was shocked as hell. The bunny honestly looked scary as shit. It definitely wasn't the same bright, happy-looking bunny that I had loved so much as a kid. No, this one looked off somehow. I don't know if it was the costume or makeup, or just the way the person in it was behaving, but the more I looked at it, the creepier it got. Still, it had taken me 20 minutes to walk to the mall, and I didn't want to leave without the picture, so I got in line. I figured that the bunny had to look less creepy up close, so I continued to wait until I finally made it up to the front of the line. About 15 to 20 minutes later, I was finally there. However, the bunny unfortunately looked the complete opposite from what I had expected. The bunny was somehow even creepier up close. I still couldn't quite figure out what it was, but I just felt uneasy around it. I hesitantly sat on the bunny's lap and waited to be photographed. As I sat there, I remembered the bunny whispering something in my ear along the lines of,
"Do you want to eat my carrot, little boy?"
No, sir. I just want a picture.
I took my picture with the bunny as quickly as possible and then got the hell out of there. I still felt very unsettled as I exited the mall. I was pretty disappointed too. I was hoping for a much better experience than I had gotten. I felt better after I left and immediately started walking back home. It had gotten slightly late while I had been inside the mall, and the sun was starting to go down. I hoped that I would make it home before dark. After a few minutes of walking, I decided to take a shortcut through a deserted alleyway. It was honestly rather unsettling walking through there, but I was used to it by that point, and it did save a lot of time. I still felt uneasy for some reason, and something told me that I should get home as fast as possible. Not long after turning into the alleyway, I started to hear footsteps behind me, like someone was following me. I ignored it for a second as I thought it was just my imagination. But then there was no mistaking the sound of footsteps getting louder and louder straight behind me. I suddenly felt scared as hell and immediately turned around to see who was there. And that's when I saw something so utterly terrifying. It was the same bunny from the mall. He stopped as I turned around and stood there motionless, staring at me gauntly. It was completely terrifying. I began to slowly back away. Then out of nowhere, the bunny pulled out a machete and started sprinting towards me, laughing like a psycho. I immediately got the hell out of there and started sprinting down the alleyway, not daring to look back. As I ran, I could hear the bunny's footsteps getting louder behind me. He was gaining on me. Then I felt the bunny's fingertips touch my back, like he was trying to grab me and was almost close enough. I felt like my lungs were about to burst as I sprinted as fast as I could, forcing myself to go even faster. That's when I was able to outrun the bunny as I came flying out of the alleyway and turned down the street to my house. I was so close. I still didn't dare look behind me as I pounded up the steps and flung the door open, slamming it behind me. I immediately told my parents what had happened and they called the cops. I looked out the window, but the bunny was nowhere to be seen. The cops arrived soon after and searched the whole area, but they didn't find anything. The bunny had completely disappeared. The next day, we called the mall to find out who the bunny was. It turned out that the bunny was revealed to be a man named Daniel, who had failed to register as an offender for his past crimes. My parents were immediately sick. Most of the parents in the area caused an outrage when the news came out. They couldn't believe that their kids had been sitting on that psycho's lap. As for me, I don't really share the same love for the Easter Bunny anymore. I still wonder what would have happened to me if the man had caught up to me that night. This story was inspired by a real-life case regarding a 24-year-old man named Daniel Sanderson for failing to register as an offender. Sanderson had been working at the Dakota Square Mall in Myuu. He was hired by a temporary employment service and was posing for photos with mall guests as the Easter Bunny. A spokesperson for the parent company for the Dakota Square Mall released a statement saying that Cherry Hill Photo Enterprise hired Sanderson. They claim that all applicants are, quote-unquote, subject to a strict background screening process. Since then, mall guests have expressed their outrage for Dakota Square Mall for not taking extra precautions with new hires, and for Cherry Hill Photography for not doing proper background checks. This happened back when I was married to my current wife, Penny. Back in those days, she was a kind and beautiful woman. Not to mention, she was 12 years younger than me, which I'm not ashamed to admit was a huge plus. It was my second marriage, so I didn't mind that it was her fourth marriage. In hindsight, that should have been a warning to me, but I was too much of a fool to see it. Everything was fine for years. We raised 3 children together, but as soon as our youngest left home, Penny took a turn for the worse. I don't know if it was the first symptoms of dementia or not, because she started treating me like garbage. She cheated on me countless times, calls me names, and thousands of dollars go missing from our bank account every month, so she can buy God knows what, and I'm sure she's addicted to more than just vodka. Whatever cocktail she's taking, it usually ends with her coming home to scream and throw knives and plates at me until she passes out on the couch for the night. Needless to say, it's been a long time since we slept in the same bed together. I don't even want to think about it, but I don't get the luxury of ignoring it while I'm stuck living with her. She's the mother of my children, but every year, things just get worse and worse. I've considered divorce, but I worry it would only make her more unstable. Then one day, on the 1st of April, I discovered something extremely disturbing. I remember strolling through Facebook on my laptop one night and stumbled upon Penny's page. That's when I saw that she had posted a picture of herself knitting together a noose. There was a caption above the image that read, "I wish he would use this." It was clear that it was me, and that she wanted me to hang from it. I was in shock. Unfortunately, my only option was to believe it was a tasteless April Fool's joke. However, that would not be the last one. Every April Fool's Day afterward, Penny would post another supposed joke about taking my life in one way or another, and each time it seemed more serious than the last. At this point, it seems more than likely that I will die at the hands of my wife on the 1st of April. Right now, as I finish writing this letter, it is almost midnight on the 31st of March. If anyone is reading this, consider it proof of her guilt. Goodbye, children. Signed, David Jackson.
Honey, I'm home!
Oh God, she's drunk again.
Where are you?
Are you hiding from me again?
Oh crap, is it midnight already?
It's that time of the year again! Happy April Fools! You stupid old fool, you ruined my life! Now I'm going to ruin yours!
She's really gonna do it this time, isn't she?
I can hear you stomping around up there!
Just leave me alone, you old fart! I don't want your saggy jugs near me!
Oh, come on, dear. We're husband and wife. Shouldn't we sleep together?
We don't do that anymore! I'll never pull my diaper down for you, woman! You hear me?
You don't tell me what I know or don't know! I make the decisions around here! Now open this door and let me in!
No! You're not coming anywhere near me while you're drunk! Just get your mimosa breath away from me!
I'm not going anywhere until you let me in!
Penny! Stop! Don't do this! We can talk it out! I'm sorry I raised my voice. I'll do whatever you want to make it up to you. I swear. Just don't hurt me. You can sleep with me if you want.
It's too late for that, old man! You had your chance!
Penny, why are you doing this?
For all the times you treated me like your slave!
Penny, please stop! Or I'm gonna call the cops!
Screw you, you piece of shit!
Penny, no! Stop
it! This story was inspired by a disturbing April Fool's incident that happened in 2021. A 66-year-old woman named Penny Jackson posted a sick April Fool's joke about hanging her husband just months before she pulled the knife on him on her 66th birthday. What makes things even more disturbing was how the woman calmly told police that she should have did more to him. The April Fool's joke prior to all of this was that Jackson had made her Facebook cover photograph of an image of a woman knitting a noose on April 1st of last year. A caption above the image read, "Quarantined with hubby for 2 weeks. Gertrude is knitting something special for him." Jackson was later found guilty by a jury and sentenced to life. This happened around Easter, back in the early 2000s. I was still a teen then, and didn't have a very good home life at that time, so I tried to spend as much time out of the house as possible. The problem was, I didn't live in a great part of town, so there weren't many options for after-school hangouts. I usually ended up going to this one mall every day and wasting time until I finally decided to go home. There was never much to do there, but it was better than hearing my parents argue. Then one day, something happened that made me never want to go back to that mall again. It all started out completely normal. I headed over to the mall after school as usual and tried to find something to do. I had planned to hang out with a couple of my friends there, but they had all canceled on me at the last minute, so I went alone. The mall really wasn't the best place to hang out. It was really ghetto and kind of creepy looking. From the outside, it almost looked abandoned. The paint was chipping and peeling, and it was filthy all over. It would have made for a good haunted house though. The inside wasn't much better either. It was filled with a bunch of lowlifes loitering around the low-end stores that obviously weren't very well maintained. I don't know how any of them stayed in business, because the place didn't get much customers at all. Like I said, just a bunch of druggies and 1 or 2 customers at best. When I got there, I walked around for a bit and looked in the windows of a couple of stores, but I didn't go in any. The place honestly seemed even more run down than usual. It looked like nobody had cleaned in years. And what was even more disturbing was that I didn't see a single employee anywhere. At first, I figured they must have just made labor cuts since the mall had been losing money, but the more I walked around, the eerier it got. There appeared to be some electrical problem going on too, as the lights kept flickering weirdly, and they were completely off in some areas. It definitely didn't help make the place any less creepy. After a few more minutes of walking around, I was starting to get a little freaked out. I still hadn't seen an employee, and the mall felt like it was getting darker the further I went into it. It was easily the creepiest that it had ever been inside. I was beginning to think that I just needed to get the hell out of there. When I turned a corner and came into a concourse in the center of the mall, I saw a man dressed as a bunny, sitting on a chair. The bunny looked creepy. It looked like the bunny suit was some worn-out costume that the mall recycled every Easter for years. What made it even more eerie was how the lights above him began to flicker off and on. It made the whole area look pretty creepy, and it struck me as odd that there would be someone dressed as a bunny in the middle of the mall, but I guess it made sense as it was around Easter. I was just happy to see another normal person though, so I walked right over to him. The closer I got to the bunny, the scarier he looked. He was completely gone, and the suit looked ratty and old, like it had been pulled out of the garbage or something. Hey, I'm pretty glad to see you. I was beginning to think I was the only normal person here. The bunny didn't respond. He just kept sitting in the chair, not moving at all. As I got closer, I realized that there was a camera stand set up in front of him. I didn't see any cameraman though, and it didn't seem like anyone wanted to take a picture with the bunny either. I stopped a little way away and tried to talk to him again. Slow day, huh? The bunny still didn't move or say anything. It was eerie. I didn't know if the man inside the suit was asleep, or if it was like an animatronic like the ones at Chuck E. Cheese. Either way, it made me really uncomfortable the way he just sat there in the chair. For some reason, I kind of wanted to take a picture with the bunny but was scared to approach him. Something just didn't feel right. Hey man, can I get a pic? The bunny still didn't say anything, even though I was standing directly in front of him. He just sat there motionless, like he was asleep or something. I finally got tired of waiting for a response, and took it upon myself to sit on the bunny's lap and take a selfie. The guy still didn't move through the whole interaction. After taking the picture, I immediately left the mall and headed home. I heard some police sirens on the way back, but I just assumed that it was due to more crime from the shitty area I lived in. I practically heard sirens every day, though as I went home, I felt again that something just wasn't right about the bunny. It was later revealed in the news that the mall bunny was found unresponsive the day before and was determined to be dead. Not only that, but the entire mall had been shut down literally a few minutes after I had left, meaning that he had to have been dead while I was there. I couldn't fully believe what I found out at first. To this day, I get scared anytime I share the story or look at that selfie. The idea that I had been so close to a dead body haunts me. This story was inspired by an incident that happened in 2018 at an Ocean County mall. An individual dressed as an Easter bunny became ill while working at the mall and was immediately taken to a hospital for treatment according to officials. The police responded to the mall around 11 a.m. Monday after receiving a report of an individual in distress. There, they found the 35-year-old Bayville woman in the bunny suit having a medical episode. It has been unclear if the woman has passed on since her time in the hospital. The mall later stated that the woman would be treated and would continue to operate their Easter bunny operations for the remainder of Easter.
That St. Patrick's Day just happened to be a Saturday. I had plans to go to the lake with my friends Kylie and Monica. The community dock was pretty popular. Lots of people went swimming in the lake or rented canoes from the boathouse. My mother dropped me off as usual. To get there, you only had to drive a mile or two through woods to a parking lot. And after that, unless you were hauling a boat, it was a short walk down a trail to the water. She told me to meet her back there by 3 o'clock, which gave me and my friends plenty of time to hang out. We managed to get one of the last canoes from the boathouse and paddled out away from the shore. That's when my friend Kylie pulled a bottle of liquor out of her bag that she'd stolen from her parents. She pressured me and Monica to drink with her because it was St. Patrick's Day, but we were really scared of getting caught by our parents or somebody passing by us on another boat. We were far from old enough to drink, and it was a small town, so almost everybody knew everybody. However, after a little convincing, it seemed like it would be perfectly fine to sneak a little bit here and there while we were out in the water. After all, who would be able to tell what we were doing from the shore? And it wasn't like a boat could sneak up on us. We started drinking slowly, passing it amongst each other. It didn't take long for the liquor to start going down easier and easier, and pretty soon we were snatching the bottle out of each other's hands to take longer and longer chugs. 3 or 4 hours later, the bottle was empty. We tossed it into the lake to get rid of the evidence, but there was no hiding how drunk we were. We got so rowdy that we almost tipped the boat a few times, and I'm sure everyone could hear us shouting and screaming at each other like a bunch of hooligans. Somehow, though, none of us got nauseous from the boat rocking around in the water. The only thing that got us heading back to the shore was when I looked at my watch and realized it was already almost 3 o'clock. I forced Kylie and Monica to start paddling toward land with me, but they were so wasted that they barely cared about my curfew. I was clenching my teeth the whole time, nervous about my mom asking why I was late to meet her at the car. In my mind, if I was late by just a couple of minutes, it guaranteed that she would find out I had been drinking. When we got back to land and put the canoe away in the boathouse, I knew I only had a few minutes until 3. Unfortunately, Kylie and Monica badly needed to use the bathroom. I didn't want to walk back alone, so I waited outside for a minute or two. But when it became obvious that they would take longer than I could spare, I decided to meet up with them later and started heading back on my own. It was a short walk through the woods. It should have only taken a few minutes, and if I ever saw anybody else on the trail, it was usually just another person heading to or from the lake. That day was different, though. I don't know if it was just because it was St. Patrick's Day, or if it was karma for drinking when I knew I wasn't supposed to, but halfway back to the parking lot, I saw something I never could have expected. There was a short man standing in the middle of the path. He was dressed as a leprechaun, but he was so tiny and short that he actually could have been one. He was facing me, but he wasn't going anywhere. All he did was look at the ground and twitch every few seconds. I'd never seen anything so creepy in my life. I should have known better and turned around, but the alcohol made me braver than I should have been. I decided to keep going and walk around him. It seemed like he was in some kind of trance, so I thought I could just slip by without him even noticing I was there. I tried to tread quietly, and for a moment it seemed like it would work. Then, without any warning, the most horrible and shocking possible thing happened that would completely change my life.
It was 30 years ago, on this day, that I dropped my daughter off at the lake so she could be with her friends. I left for just a few hours to take care of some errands. I thought she would be safe as long as it was bright and sunny out, but when I got back at 3 o'clock, she wasn't there. I waited, hoping she was just running a few minutes late, but when I saw her friends come back without her, I knew something was wrong. They said the last time they saw her was when they went into the bathroom after getting back from the lake. They said she was going to wait outside since she didn't have to go, but then she left by herself without saying anything. They weren't worried about her because they thought I had already picked her up, until they realized I was still looking for her. So I immediately called the police and started searching for her. After several horrible hours of looking, my worst fears were realized. Her body was found just a few yards from the trail where she disappeared. Ever since then, even after all the investigations, the suspects, the tests, nobody has been held responsible. Nobody knows what happened to her or who could have done it. At this point, I have to accept the fact that it might have been someone or something completely undetectable.
This story was inspired by a horrific St. Patrick's Day incident regarding a young female named Rachel. On March 17, 1990, Rachel and her friends spent the day boating. But around 2:45 p.m., Rachel got nervous about getting back to shore in time to meet her mother at 3 p.m. So after the boat docked, Rachel, accompanied by her friends Aaron and Maddie, began to walk the path to Carlin Park where Rachel's mother was waiting. Rachel then took it upon herself to sprint off down the path without them. She unfortunately never made it to the parking lot where her mom was waiting. Rachel's mother would later alert authorities, unable to find her at home or at the park. Police then launched a search that involved 100 deputies, 2 boats, 1 helicopter, 8 mounted deputies, and 3 canine units. After hours of searching, they found her remains in a wooded area of Carlin Park. Authorities then questioned more than 50 homeless men who were known to have frequented the wooded area, but the search led to nowhere. For 31 years, suspects have come and gone, but no one has been arrested. This whole thing happened back in the Easter of 2011, when I was still in my mid-teens. I know it doesn't sound like the kind of holiday where something terrible happens, but trust me, I'll never forget how scared I was that night. It all started when I decided to have a sleepover one night. My parents were out of town at a relative's place for Easter that I didn't want to attend, so they let me stay at home since family gatherings weren't really my thing. I didn't want to just sit around by myself for the whole weekend, so I invited my friend Lucas over to spend the night. I figured it was the perfect time as we wouldn't have to worry about bothering my parents, and we could stay up as late as we wanted. So Lucas came over that evening and we chilled the entire night. It was just a typical guy hangout. We watched TV, played video games, and ordered some pizza once we got hungry. Nothing happened that was out of the ordinary. That is, until around 1 in the morning. We were still going strong and were about to start a movie, when suddenly we heard a knock at the door. We were both immediately startled. Dude, who the hell could be at your house at 1 a.m.? I don't know. My parents aren't supposed to be back until tomorrow afternoon. I figured I should go see who it was, but I felt very uneasy. There didn't seem to be any good reason that someone would be knocking on the door so late at night. Still, I didn't think I should just ignore it, so I slowly got up and walked towards the door. I stopped a few steps away from the door and called out to whoever was behind it. Who is it? There was no response, but the knocking stopped suddenly. Now there was only this eerie silence coming from the other side of the door. By that point, I was really freaked out, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to go back and tell Lucas that I was too scared to check the door though. Just as I was about to open the door, I realized I should probably check the peephole first. And when I did, I saw the creepiest thing ever. There was the scariest looking Easter bunny that I'd ever seen, standing right in front of the door. I couldn't believe my eyes. The bunny was holding a large blade, like a machete of some sort. Before I could even react, the bunny started hacking at the door, trying to break it down. I stumbled backwards from the door as Lucas came running up to find out what was happening. What is it? What's wrong? Go back to the den room! Call the cops! What? Why? What's going on? Just as he said that, the bunny's blade broke through part of the door. Then we could see his face peering in from the other side. Go! 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 We both sprinted back to the den room and slammed the door behind us. I started piling furniture in front of the door as Lucas called the cops. We were both scared out of our minds. Then, out of nowhere, we heard the front door smash open, and the bunny came running inside. We both stood there as silently as we could, hoping that he wouldn't come to our room first. I could have sliced the tension in the room with a knife. Me and Lucas stared at each other, hoping that this wasn't gonna be our last night alive. There was a brief moment of silence, but then all of a sudden, there was a loud bang as the bunny began hacking at the den room door. I pushed even more furniture up against the door and did everything I could to prevent the bunny from getting in while Lucas spoke to the police. Hello, police? Please come quick! There's a man trying to kill us! He has some sort of knife and he's broken into our house! Help! Debris flew into my face as the bunny continued to hack at the door. I watched through the pile of furniture in horror as he made several holes with his blade actually come completely through. I could even see him staring at us through the holes in the door as he continued to slash away at it. Don't be scared. It's just the Easter Bunny. I won't hurt you. The banging continued for several more seconds, and I was sure he was going to break through, when all of a sudden, it stopped. Do you think he's gone? I don't know. Why would he just leave? It seemed like the bunny had indeed left. We waited in that same room until the cops arrived. 30 minutes felt like 30 hours as we waited behind the pile of furniture, hoping we wouldn't see that bunny again. When the cops finally got there, they didn't find anything besides a few damaged items. The bunny was nowhere to be seen. The cops asked me and Lucas a few questions and then called my parents to inform them of what happened. But beyond that, they weren't much help. My parents ended up coming back that same night, terrified that something like that could have happened. The cops never found any bunny within the area either. He had disappeared. No one knew who the man in the costume was or what his motives were. The whole situation passed without anything ever happening. My family and I eventually moved out 2 months later. We couldn't live with the constant paranoia that the bunny would come back to finish what he started. We never heard anything about the bunny again, until a few years later. I decided to Google our old address one day to see if I could find anything out, and I was shocked by what I came across. Apparently, it was alleged that the new homeowners had been attacked and robbed in their home after a year and a few months of moving in. No one knew who the culprit was, but the door seemed to have been broken down with some sort of blade. I was completely traumatized after that. I realized then that if my family and I hadn't moved out, that could have been us. This story was inspired by a horrific Easter home invasion case that happened in 2014. The Kitsap County Sheriff's Office are looking for a man named Jason Lee Longshore in relation to a robbery of a home. The Sheriff's Office issued a warrant for Longshore for first-degree robbery. Longshore is the second suspect in the home invasion in which 2 men had allegedly masked up and entered a home, holding the residents inside against their will and robbing them of several $100s in cash and other valuables. The 2 suspects then drove away from the home. The first suspect, Jacob Lewis DeBeck, was arrested, but Longshore remains to be found and has since been on the run.
I was taking the bus home from work one night as usual. There weren't many people on the bus besides me, just a handful of other commuters going home late. I sat in the back and listened to music to keep anyone from talking to me. It was a long day at work and I had school the next day. When I got bored of my phone, I liked to stare out the window so I could have something to look at other than the inside of the bus. But most of the time when it's that late, I can't see much. That night, however, I saw something out of a nightmare. A huge, lifted truck pulled up next to the bus, perfectly matching speeds. And there were 2 creepy old men inside staring right at me. I tried to look away and pretend not to notice in case maybe it was just a coincidence. But as we kept going down the road, the truck didn't pull ahead or fall behind even a foot. The driver kept the truck right at the spot of the bus that I was on, and the passenger was relentlessly staring me down. I knew I was being watched. I've dealt with weirdos on the bus before, but this was different. Those guys didn't have a trace of harmlessness in their eyes that most weird guys have. They were mean and gross looking, and they knew what they were doing by scaring the crap out of me. I had no idea what to do and I didn't have much time to think about it either. I was already close to my stop. I didn't want to get off the bus at my stop because I knew in my gut that they would just stop and follow me. And plus, then they would know where I lived. But then again, if I tried to stay on the bus, how long would they keep following me? Would they ever stop? Finally, I decided it wasn't worth getting dumped off somewhere I wasn't familiar with, and I should just try to get home. The upside was that my house was right around the corner from the bus stop. It usually only took me a minute to walk, but if I needed to, I could shrink that to 30 seconds or less. The bus came to a stop and I got off, immediately breaking into my fastest possible power walk. Unfortunately, I heard the truck pull over behind me and stop. Another shot of adrenaline coursed through me and I managed to walk even faster. A moment later, I heard the doors opened and shut, followed by footsteps. It sounded like big 200-pound men in boots marching to get me, closer and closer until it was right behind me. Before I knew it, I was at the front door to my house. I punched the code in faster than I have in my life and opened the door, stepped inside, then quickly turned around and shut the door behind me. but it was too late. One of the men got to the door and tried to force his way in. The only thing that kept him from barging straight through the door was my foot jammed underneath it, and my entire panicking body weight pushing against him. Somehow, with all of my might, I managed to fight back and win and close the door. I locked it immediately, only for the door to almost get broken down by that creep banging and screaming on it for me to let him in. Open the door! Open it or I'll let myself in!
Get away from me!
Or what? You don't stand a chance against the both of us.
Leave me alone or I'm calling the cops!
All I could think to do was scream that I was going to call the police over and over again. I didn't know what they expected me to do. Just sit on the floor crying and wait for them to break in? Obviously, they weren't very smart. They looked confused, like they never heard anyone say that they were calling the cops before. But they finally got the message and ran off. After I caught my breath from all the screaming, I called my parents and then the police. They asked to review the footage captured by the doorbell camera. They took their pictures and used them to ask the public if anyone has seen these men or know who they are. But it's been quite a while and nothing has come of it. At least I haven't seen a trace of them either. Though I'm still dealing with the after effects and trauma of looking over my shoulder all the time. Worried to death that they'll follow me again and corner me somewhere. Every time I see a lifted truck, or any pickup truck really, my heart jumps and my mind starts racing, forcing me to wonder what would have happened to me if I hadn't made it into my house in time. What disturbs me about that even more is what the men were holding in their hands in the video captured at the door. The one who almost got through was holding a black rag, which the police believed was probably soaked in chloroform. That kind of eliminates any doubt that they were trying to kidnap me. I never had a problem with riding the bus until that night, but now, I don't know if I'll ever be able to ride public transit again. Unfortunately, I have to be a bit of a burden now, because I have to make it my parents' duty to drive me wherever I need to go, or carpool with coworkers and friends until I get my own car. Anything beats taking a chance on being alone on the bus ever again. This story was inspired by quite possibly one of the scariest ring camera footages on the internet. A younger girl appears to be heading home and punching in her buzzer code. Oddly calm, cool, and collected, she swiftly gets inside her home just before two large men enter her porch. One of the men can be seen trying to open the door, but when he realizes it's locked, he begins to casually knock on the door. The girl starts to scream, threatening to call the cops and scaring the men away. But what is disturbing is the black cloth the men were holding. One can only speculate that it was chloroform. What could have been a night of horrors had the men got a hold of the girl is something just downright terrifying.
This happened around the Easter of 2001, when I used to live with my family. I grew up in a pretty wealthy household. The house consisted of my parents, my sister, and I. We lived in a mansion located somewhere in Fresno, California. My parents were millionaires, which meant my sister and I got pretty much whatever we wanted. Our parents were always too busy to spend much time with us, so they would just buy us anything that we asked for to make up for it. Then, one day, everything changed. When I turned 21, my parents suddenly decided that they didn't want to keep spoiling me. They told me that it wasn't fair to me to make me think that I could have whatever I wanted all the time. It all seemed like a load of shit to me, but they really committed to it. They kept going with it, and they started doing the same with my sister as well. Not only did they continue to try and teach us responsibility, but they also decided to set our inheritance so that we wouldn't receive it until we turned 35. According to them, It would make us better people if we learned to provide for ourselves for a few years before we got any money from them. And that's when I started going batshit crazy.
You pieces of dog shit! Y'all want to ruin my Easter? Ruin my sleeping schedule? Ruin my entire life when you could just direct deposit me a small allowance? I hate you! I hate you! I hate you!
What made things worse was that my sister didn't even seem to mind. She said she actually understood what my parents were trying to do and that she supported their decision. She didn't want to rely on them for everything. She wanted to go out into the world and work for herself. Again, I just couldn't wrap my head around why someone would worry about working when they knew they stood to inherit millions of dollars later on. I tried to get my sister to see my side, but she wouldn't listen. Whenever I tried convincing her, she would just ignore me and say that I needed to grow up. That's what really annoyed me. My parents and sister thought they were so much smarter and more understanding than I was, and it was so frustrating. I tried to tell myself to just get over it, that I just had to live with my parents' decision. Still, 35 years old was a long way off. Then, one day, around Easter, everything changed. I had decided to spend Easter weekend with my girlfriend and her family. I remember being away from home for several days. It was a really nice time, and I enjoyed having a break from my family for a while. But eventually, I knew I would have to head home. Hello, I'm home. I arrived at home around 8 p.m. and was surprised to find that the house was gloomy and dark. There was no way that my family would have gone to sleep yet, so it was really weird to find the house so quiet. I thought at first that they had all gone out, but then I saw my parents' car in the driveway. It was bizarre. I started to get a really uneasy feeling. It didn't make much sense. As I walked toward the kitchen area, all of the lights were off inside. I couldn't see anything at first. Hello? Mom? Dad? Lisa?
The house was eerie. I just stood there in pitch darkness. But what made things more eerie was how there were an unusual amount of flies hovering around the kitchen.
An insane thought suddenly came to me and I started to panic. I slowly reached my hand for the light switch on the wall, trying to find it in the dark. And when I was finally able to grasp the switch, I flipped it on. And that's when I saw the most disturbing, most horrific sight I have ever laid eyes on. There on the kitchen floor was my family lying motionless.
Somebody help me! Help!
My entire family was gone, right there in front of me. For a second, I thought I would actually faint from sheer terror. I staggered backwards for a moment, but I managed to stay on my feet and pull out my phone. I frantically dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency?
Please, you have to help me. My family is on the ground. I think they're... Oh my god. Oh god.
I completely lost it and started sobbing uncontrollably. I just couldn't handle what was going on. The cops came shortly after that, but there was nothing they could do. It was already too late. They took the remains away and then brought me down to the station for questioning. They asked me if I knew anything about what happened to my family, but I couldn't say anything of that. The words just wouldn't come out. I was still in too much shock. But after further investigation, they had found out that I hired a hitman. I had promised him a portion of my inheritance if my family was taken out. I just couldn't wait until I was 35 to get the money. I was arrested and charged soon after, along with the hitman and his accomplices. We were all convicted to life in prison without parole. As I spend the rest of my life in prison, I keep coming back to one thing. It was all for nothing, and I'll forever hate Easter. This story was inspired by a horrific Easter incident revolving around a 21-year-old rich kid named Dana Yule, who learned that he would not receive his $7.9 million inheritance until he was 35 years old. He then set a devious plan in motion to expedite the process. Yule, who had been living with his millionaire parents as well as his sister Tiffany, derived a plot to take out his family. The plan took place on an Easter Sunday. The bodies of Dale, Glee, and Tiffany Yule were discovered in their ranch home in Fresno, California. The crime scene evidence suggested a hitman-for-hire scheme, and authorities quickly focused their investigation on their surviving son, Dana, who at the time was away with his girlfriend and her parents. Authorities were able to connect him to the crime. Dana Yule and his two accomplices were all sentenced to life without parole.
This all happened a few weeks ago. I had just recently moved into a new neighborhood in Ohio. I lived alone and had moved to be closer to where I worked. It was a pretty nice neighborhood and I didn't have any complaints, at least for a while anyway. Then it started to get a little worse. For the past couple of weeks, there had been a huge surge of people in the neighborhood having their houses ding-dong ditched in the middle of the night. People would be awakened by the doorbell going off over and over again. But when they went to answer the door, no one would be there. Normally this wouldn't have been that concerning to people. After all, this kind of thing happens sometimes. The problem was that it was happening to so many different people all over the neighborhood. There had been over 30 different reports of ding-dong ditchers, and what was worse was that there had even been some break-ins and reports of people being attacked. Despite the high crime rates, no arrests had been made. The police said that they were looking into it, but they didn't seem to be making any progress. They probably had enough on their plates without having to worry about some doorbells. The whole situation had become a huge topic of conversation around the neighborhood. A lot of people were complaining about it and trying to come up with solutions, but I wasn't too worried. I assumed it was because of the summertime and some of the local kids were just being a little mischievous. I was sure that it would pass once school started. Plus, nothing had happened to me yet, and I had already been living there for a couple of months. It seemed like it was being blown out of proportion. Then, a little more recently, it started happening to me too. What the hell is going on? I started getting a lot of doorbell rings around nighttime. At first it was just once or twice a week, but then it started happening at least 2 or 3 times every other day, and it was always around 2 or 3 in the morning. I figured of course it was the ding-dong ditchers. I didn't want to let it bother me since I knew that's what they wanted, but it was getting really annoying. I could rarely get a full night's sleep anymore. Even on the nights when nothing happened, I would still worry that I would be woken up all of a sudden, so it made it hard for me to fall asleep as well. I didn't want to call the police because I knew they were already getting enough calls from my neighbors. I also knew that it wouldn't do much since the ding-dong ditchers always ran away right after anyway. There was no way the police could have come in time to catch them. I heard that a lot of residents have been installing ring cameras on their front doors. I decided to do the same, but I've been haunted ever since I installed that camera. It was all because of this one night. I was sleeping soundly for the first time in a while when I heard the doorbell ring again. It was around 1:30 in the morning. At first, I had a sudden urge to run to the door and try to catch whoever was tormenting me. I was tired of being awakened every night for no reason. I wanted to put an end to it. But then I remembered my ring camera, and I realized there was no need for me to get up. I would easily be able to see who had been there on the footage. I decided to sleep it off and check the camera in the morning. The next day, I woke up feeling pretty groggy and headed to work. I felt tired the whole morning. It had taken me a little while to fall asleep again the night before. I could hardly focus on what I was doing. Later on, during my break, I remembered the camera footage. I had completely forgotten to check it. I brought it up on my phone and started scrolling the footage. That's when I saw something disturbing. When I got to the time just before my doorbell had gone off the night before, I caught a glimpse of something in the distance, and I paused the video. There was a man standing across the street. I could barely make it out since he was at the edge of the camera's range, but there was definitely someone there. As I let the footage play again, I watched the man stand there for several minutes, just staring at my house. Then, as the footage continued, the man slowly began walking towards the camera. When he got closer, I saw just how creepy he looked. He was wearing the scariest jigsaw mask. He kept tilting his head back and forth while pressing his face up against my camera, taunting me and saying stuff like, "I want to play a game. I want to play a game. I want to play a game. If you answer the door, I'm going to hurt you. But if you don't, you live." He then started laughing like a deranged psycho. I was freaked out as I watched the video, but I had to see what happened next. The man went completely gaunt and paused in front of the camera. He just stared at it for several seconds and then rang the doorbell a bunch of times. A moment later, he suddenly sprinted across the street and stood in the same spot as before. He stood there for several minutes waiting, staring at my door. Then he slowly walked down the sidewalk out of the camera's view. I was pretty shaken after watching the footage, but I was also just happy that I hadn't gone to check the door that night. I don't know what the man would have done to me if I had, but what terrifies me the most was that every time I heard the doorbell ring prior to getting a Ring camera, it was probably that same man. I ended up reporting it to the police and showing them my camera footage. They now believe that the neighborhood attacks were caused by this man, and are now currently asking the public for any leads. All I know is that he's still out there for now. This story was inspired by disturbing Ring camera footage that was taken in the summer of 2023. It happened when there was a high surge in cases where people would hear their doorbell ring in the middle of the night. But one resident just so happened to capture something disturbing on their Ring camera footage. It was a video of a masked man ringing his doorbell, then immediately running across the street just to stand and watch the house. The resident immediately disclosed it to police and incurred that it happened just after 1:30 a.m. on August 26. After the footage was posted online, multiple residents from the same neighborhood claimed to have seen some other suspicious activity, such as possible thefts. Police are currently working to figure out who the masked man is and why he was there.
Well, as you know, almost every homeowner has video surveillance of some kind these days. One Bowling Green homeowner says he woke up to an unsettling sight on his camera, and now police are involved. 13 Action News reporter Megan Daniels joins us with the story, all new at 6.
One man says he woke up to the sound of his doorbell ringing, and when he went downstairs to check it out, the sight was unsettling. Take a look at your screen. This is the doorbell footage of an unidentified masked man who rang one homeowner's doorbell, then ran to the street. It may look like he ran away, but if you take a closer look, you can see the masked man just standing there facing the home.
Kind of just stared at the homeowner before, then eventually fleeing.
This uncomfortable encounter happened just after 1:30 Sunday morning on Champaign Avenue. Police say when they posted it to Facebook, neighbors sounded off.
When we posted on Facebook, obviously, people made comments, and it appeared that other people in the neighborhood indicated that maybe they had seen some other suspicious activity in the neighborhood and were concerned about possible thefts.
Right now, police are trying to figure out who the man is and why he was there.
Whether this was just a harmless person ringing the doorbell to try to mess with somebody or freak somebody out, or whether there are more sinister things going on, we don't know, unfortunately.
If you have any information on this incident or the masked man, police are asking you to call Crime Stoppers.
I guess I would say that bachelor life was fun. I lived alone in a small bungalow type house. It wasn't much, but I could come and go as I pleased. I had just recently moved out of my parents' house, so it was nice to have some freedom for a change. It was a little creepy living on my own, but I needed to move out so that I could start dating and actually have the luxury of bringing females home. It's not easy having to maneuver around your parents all the time. Everything started out just fine, but more recently, something strange had been happening. I was starting to feel paranoid, not even just every once in a while. I started to feel it constantly. Whenever I was alone at home, I would begin to feel really creeped out for no reason at all. I wasn't sure if it was just because I had moved out and was developing paranoia from living alone, but I was starting to feel concerned about it. Sometimes, I could swear that I heard a voice. I tried to tell myself that it was all in my head, that there was no way any of it was real, but I kept hearing it. It sounded like a little girl's voice, distorted and far away, barely audible. There was something about it that made me shudder. I thought that it was my neighbors for a while. I figured that they must have a kid that I could hear talking, but it didn't make any sense. There was no way that I was hearing noises from another house that often. No walls were that thin. Then I thought that it could possibly be the air vents combined with the wind or something, but I heard it from every room in the house. Sometimes it would be in one room and then I'd hear it in a completely different area later on. I couldn't figure out what it could be. It really freaked me out though. I began to feel unsafe in my own home. The voice would even wake me up at night sometimes. When that happened, I would search the house and even look around outside to see what it could be. I never found anything though. It was always empty. I started becoming more and more paranoid and scared. I was afraid to be in my house. It was already costing me sleep and now I felt like it was taking away my sanity as well. I tried to ignore it, to learn to live with it, but it was messing with my head. The sounds were always the same. It was always the same voice, over and over again. It was never ending. One day, I finally decided to set up a Ring camera around the house. I didn't know if it would do anything, but I figured that if there was actually something in my home, the camera would have to pick it up. I had to try something. I wasn't very hopeful in the beginning, but somehow the camera seemed to work. I hadn't heard anything since I had it installed. It had been days, and there was nothing but quiet. I couldn't believe it. I finally felt sane again. But of course, it didn't last. One night, I was just about to go to bed when I heard the voice again. It was the same as before, a strange, distorted child's voice seemingly coming from nowhere. Only this time, it was somehow clearer.
We are here.
I could actually pick up a few words of what had been completely inaudible. I concentrated on listening to what it was saying and struggled to make sense of it. Then it became even clearer. It sounded like someone was saying, "We are here." But what was even more disturbing was that it sounded like it was coming from outside. I listened harder and realized that the sounds were coming from the backyard. I started to check, but I suddenly heard glass shattering. Someone was trashing my backyard. I ducked for cover, assuming that someone was trying to break in. But after a few seconds, I still hadn't heard anyone in the house. I started to call the cops, but I decided to check the Ring camera first. I wanted to know what I was dealing with. There was no one there. I was so confused. I knew that I heard someone outside, but the camera showed the yard completely empty. I ran to the backyard to see for myself, and again there was no one. The yard was trashed though, so I hadn't imagined the sounds. I had no idea what could have happened. There was a broken window and trash and debris scattered everywhere. Obviously someone had been there, or something. I thought that maybe it had been an animal. I figured that I should still call the cops, but I didn't want to try and explain how I didn't know what had been in my yard. I decided to check the camera footage again. This time I went back a couple of minutes to around the time that I heard the noises. That's when I saw something scary as hell. At first there was nothing, just like before. It was just a blank dark yard. Then something moved into view. There was this white, cloudy figure gliding across the screen. I couldn't believe it. It was a ghost right there on the camera. I was scared out of my mind. It slowly moved across the yard and out of view, stuff flying about and smashing as it went by. I had never been so creeped out. That thing had actually been in my yard. I realized then that the ghost was the source of the noise that I was hearing. It had to have been, because after that night, I never heard the noises again. It was like it had just left. I have since released the footage online. I'm not really sure why. I think I just didn't want to be the only one to live with the image. I've had my house on sale for a few weeks now. I can't bring myself to live there anymore. Not when it could come back. This story was inspired by a Ring camera video that has been circulating and going viral on social media. The video showcases footage of what appears to be a seemingly normal backyard. But what comes next is something truly bizarre. Towards the left side of the camera, a ghost or spirit or entity of some sort flies across the owner's hammock and towards the right side of the backyard. What makes this even more horrifying was how it was alleged that the owner of the Ring camera footage claims that he would hear a little girl's voice every night saying, quote unquote, "We are here." There is no other way to describe this other than downright disturbing.